Well, thank you very much, Ms. Adams, for joining us here on Objections. Just to get right into it, this past week, a federal judge uh, ruled that your estranged husband, Stewart Rhodes, should be detained pending trial in the Oath Keepers' seditious conspiracy case. And in that ruling, it mentioned that you placed a call with the court. Can you talk about that, what you told the judge, and why you did that?
Well, I got a little panicked. I really thought it was a done deal. Like, I did not expect any chance of bail whatsoever. So I had read the article in the Politico, I think, where it said he had one of Stewart's cousins on the stand, and the judge seemed to be seriously considering placing him with them as custodians. And I know the cousins a little bit. It's the husband of a half-second cousin. I mean, he's really reaching for people. It's a half-second cousin. But I've met them. I think they seem to be fairly nice people. I think they're very naive, and I think that they're very Christian, and they think that they're helping him. I mean, I tried to do that for 20 years before I realized there's nothing you cannot fix a psychopath. So yeah, I thought I kind of panicked because I thought, yeah, he might get out, and then I didn't even occur to me maybe I could do something, and I thought I could try. So I just looked it up, and I just called the judge's chambers, and I asked if I could make a statement, and they let me. And they brought the lawyers. They kind of reconvened. They brought the lawyers on within. I mean, they called me back. First they said they couldn't do that, and referred me to the U.S. attorneys. And of course, I've already been in contact with the FBI and everything, but there's so many people involved in this, and I just really thought, I don't know if this message is going to get through. And then before I could even punch in one number for the U.S. attorney, they called me right back. The judge said we were reconvening. Within 10 minutes, we had multiple attorneys on the phone, and I was a little shell shocked.
Mm.
But I mean, this was our life. Our life revolved around him escaping one day if the feds ever came. And this was our life for years. It's all he talked about. I always thought it was silly. It always seemed ridiculous. But then as he got further and further in Oath Keepers, he was creating it as a reality that it might actually happen. And this is all he did. I mean, he lived for this. He rented backhoes, and there's no disputing it. Some photos came up online that had nothing to do with the escape tunnels. They were just funny photos that I had posted. So I just, yeah, it was our whole life. It was our whole life. Yeah, and there were, tons and tons of rolls of razor wire, and all these plants he bought to hide it. And the only reason he didn't install all these booby traps was because my son and I kept hiding it, so he couldn't find it to set it up. And just so many elaborate plans. Most of them there was no follow through for most of it. But am I cutting out?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me just
Yeah.
pause. If can just unpack that a little bit. Your estranged husband, Stewart Rhodes, was the founder and leader of the Oath Keepers, this militia group. And so you mentioned the escape tunnels. Can
Mhm.
you run me through what did he do with these escape tunnels? What did they look like? And when did he start constantly saying that he believed the feds were after him?
Um, this was actually before even Bundy Ranch, so it was really odd that he thought that the feds would be after him. He just always thought that. He was a very paranoid person. Just not mentally unstable, really. Mentally unstable, but very intelligent enough to get himself into trouble, I think.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, is it cutting out again?
Yeah, very much so. Well,
So, yeah, so he rented a backhoe. The eventual plan, this was an 80-acre property in Montana. It backed up to National Forest, which is why he chose to live there. Property owner was very much into this. He thought it was a great idea. Half the town knew about the stupid tunnels. And he had a car. I didn't even know where he got it. With permanent registration tags, registered to somebody else, maybe 3-4 owners ago. And this car would be waiting on a logging road, which could connect to several back roads to Idaho through the woods, basically. And so these tunnels were supposed to go eventually, which he didn't quite finish, was there was supposed to be a shed, 3-sided shed around the back door of the house. So you go out the back door and down into the tunnel where your snow camo, or depending on the season, camo for all the kids, all this camo stacked up for all the kids, for snow and green camo. And people would put on their camo, which the kids and I were never going to take part in this. Put on the camo, go through the tunnels, all the way out into National Forest and the cover of trees where the car is waiting, and then drive out to Idaho. And who knows where from there. I don't know I have no idea what the next plan was after that.
And
so
you
that
also told the judge that Mr. Rhodes had a history of violence with you and the children. If you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about that?
He had always been controlling and violent in sort of fits and starts. You know, there's always, I mean, the controlling and the psychological abuse was constant. The physical abuse was sort of in his sort of random rampages that would happen, and it might be 6 months or it might be a week between. And he always wanted, like people have seen with J6, he always wants deniability legally. So he'll never just hit you, but he'll accidentally hit you. And when I think I've described a few times, attempted to describe that he would do sort of martial arts if he was upset with you. But I think maybe that gives a bad picture of it. There's one example is, you know, I say that I want to sit down, I'm tired, I just want to sit down for a minute, and that makes him angry. So he has his sticks, his rattan sticks, and he just starts standing over the back of my chair and hitting for a half an hour the side of the chair, you know, this far from my ear, yeah, half-inch from my ear, for like a half an hour straight, you know. And if I move, I'm gonna, you know, crack my jaw. So, you know, so that type of thing. Or he would ask the kids, oh, let's do some stick fighting, and he would hand the kid a padded stick, you know. Oh, whoops, you know, and he's smacking him with a rattan stick. And but these things would correlate to when he was upset. These weren't random things, you know. If he was happy, nobody gets hurt. He'd also throw things. And then there were, you know, times when he would draw his gun, and it started with the dog. It started with the kid's puppy. He was upset with their puppy, and he just racks the sight on his gun. He didn't shoot the dog, but he said he was going to, and everyone's screaming and crying. And so it started with that, and then progressed. And then it got to where he was punching my son, who was a teenager at that point, and my son would never, you know, he would just say, you know, just stop, just stop. And even when he was, you know, like maybe like 13, when he was just still a kid, you know, just punch him right in the face. And oh, and then just immediately would say, I don't know what happened, you know, oh, it's just because I was abused as a child, and I had a rough upbringing, and I can't believe I've done this thing. And then 30 seconds later, I never knew if he was just convincing himself or just gaslighting. He would immediately say, wow, I'm so glad I'm the type of person that would never hit one of my kids. Even though I lost my temper, I would never hit you, right? Right? And then you have to agree. It was really strange. It was like this control the narrative, and then he would repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. I have never hit my children immediately after hitting. So it was really strange. And, you know, by that time, mean, I guess I'll just stick to what I told the judge, but that type of thing. And then that progressed to a lot of, toward the end there, he would draw his handgun a lot. And he would say he was drawing it because he was suicidal. But then he would wave it, he would rack the slide and he'd sort of wave it around the room and say, I see what you've made me do. See what you're making me do. You've done this because you want to go to the grocery store, or you want to go outside, or you you want to leave the house. Usually it's because I wanted to go get some groceries or wanted to leave the house for a bit. That was a huge issue. And he would just break down and he would just start screaming and yelling. And then, but in the end, he would say, well, I'm just suicidal. I would never threaten you. But he's waving this gun around, his finger on the trigger. And so that went from happening, every couple of years, every year or so. And then after Bundy Ranch, this was like maybe every week. And I really thought, I just think if we hadn't gotten out when we did, we'd be dead. Somebody would be dead by now, because
So you were
it
married.
was just constant. And
Oh, I'm
then
sorry.
what's up?
The
Yeah.
connection cut off, and
Oh,
that's why I didn't realize you were still speaking.
yes. And then there was another time where he just sort of really just lost it, and he choked my teenage daughter, and he could have killed her. And my son stopped him. And then that was kind of like, we got to get out of this. We got to get out of it. And I probably would not have gotten out, except my two oldest kids became adults. And they are the ones who got the rest of us out, because they had things like cell phones and cars and jobs and some money, to get out with. And otherwise we would not. We were in the middle of the woods. Most of the time we did not have a car. He would rent a car for himself and come into town for 2 or 3 weeks and keep a car rental that whole time, and then fly to town with the drive out or turn the car in at the airport. And then he would just try to keep us without a car all the time. We had a car, but he would drop it off at the shop. It's really strange, but he would just do constant car repairs on a car that had like 300,000 miles, constantly. It was in the shop the last time around, I think it was in the shop for almost 8 months, just to make sure we didn't have any kind of vehicle. So we're just in the woods eating, powdered cheese. I think I gained 70 pounds after I divorced him, just because I could eat it. It was food, but I mean, it's just how we lived. And everything was about him wanting to escape the feds. I mean, everything, the whole lifestyle. And there was this constant violence. And it just to hear anyone taking him serious about not wanting to run, if he had gotten out on bail, he would have been gone. I don't know if I cut out just now, but he would have been gone. He would have, if he'd have gotten out on bail, he'd be in South America by now, I think.
And you had been married to him for nearly 25 years before you filed for divorce. Can you walk me through that moment that you started to describe what was the last straw for you, that incident? Can you describe that one more time?
He just, I don't even know what it was over. He claims over and over again that he claims it was an argument my daughter was having with me when she was 13 or 14. I don't remember anything like that. I remember telling her she was right about something, and I had apologized to her for something. I had said, I think you're right about this. I don't remember what it was, but that was a real trigger for him. Whenever he would see the kids and I sort of having genuine moments, or if I would say, I think I was wrong here. I think you were right. Or, that kind of exchange, a genuine exchange of emotion. It was a real trigger for him. And that's what really set him off. And he just ran at her and grabbed her throat. And she said he just squeezed so hard. And, I regret I didn't take photos. I was still in that mindset of, even though I knew he wanted to get out, I still just had that fear of wanting to cover for him all the time, and I should have thought to take photos. Yet she had bruises, all the way down her side, and it was horrible. And that's when I thought, if we don't get out, he's gonna kill one of the kids. He's gonna kill me. He's gonna. this is insane. We can't live like this. The threat before that was always the fear. He's a powerful lawyer. He would always give parables about women who wind up in mental institutions and lose their kids and how it would happen. And he'd always tell me stories like that. A lot of women are unstable and they have to be locked up.
Mm.
But they lose their kids, and reminding me that he's an intelligent lawyer with this Yale law degree, and he has all these powerful friends. And so the fear was if I ever filed for divorce, he would take the kids from me and just say that, try to claim that I was mentally unstable. And so, but the fear of being in that house any longer, just this outweighed any of that at that point, So.
When did the Oath Keepers, do you remember, they came into the picture? When did he have this interest in forming this extremist group?
So this was 2008, 2009. What I've noticed with Stewart, he's a sociopath, obviously. He's also a narcissist, and how narcissists, they absorb your energy, right? They live off of other people's energy and time and their accomplishments, and they kind of soak it up, and looking back, I see that in 2008, the Ron Paul movement was a huge deal. There was a lot of youth, there was a lot of money, a lot of energy. He had worked for Ron Paul in the past. So I think he wanted to absorb that Ron Paul energy. And if you look at the early Oath Keepers, I thought it wasn't a bad idea. It was absolutely the opposite of what it became. It absolutely was. They would have come down, had the original Oath Keepers been around during the time of the George Floyd, they would have been on the other side of it. No question. No question. The whole entire purpose of Oath Keepers, to the way he sold it to me, was that it would have been something to be a support group for other officers, to say, no, we're not going to just toe the line. We're not going to do this. You can't do that. That's racist. That's, it's too violent. You can't do that. And so that was the original intent of Oath Keepers, to the way he pushed it. But now I have a better understanding of him. And I think he just saw that Ron Paul energy, and he morphed Oath Keepers to match it, to match what Ron Paul people wanted. This sort of what he originally called it, the libertarian version of the ACLU, to keep, and but geared toward police and military to make sure that they obeyed the law. And then comes the Tea Party movement, and then he morphs again. And this is something that I had a little bit of trouble with, and he lost a lot of people over, and he started getting more and more Republican. And he sort of, this is a lot of energy and a lot of money, and he just starts morphing. And this is something I see more in retrospect now. He starts morphing for that energy. And then again comes the Trump train. And then all of a sudden, this apolitical organization that at one point, lost half its board members, saying that you can't do no-knock raids, is supporting Trump. It's completely bizarre. Less bizarre if you understand that he goes after waves of people and energy to try to absorb them for himself as much as possible. There's a lot of energy in those Berkeley riots, and I think he wanted in on that. He had a lot of jealousy for Gavin McInnes. Oddly, he would sometimes just fixate on a person and just get weirdly jealous of them. It's just Gavin McInnes got top billing when he spoke a lot above Stewart, and it just would lose his mind, and he just became sort of obsessed with it and wanting to go to all the Berkeley events. And it was just really odd. But now I think looking back on it, I have a better understanding of it, is he was just shifting and changing to try to get what he eventually wanted, which was power and a place in history. And I think, go ahead.
No, that's okay. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I'm positive he knows that Trump did not win the election. I'm positive he knows that Trump lost.
And that it's just, say that?
because he's intelligent, but he knows how to use people, and he uses people's wishes against them and their what they want to believe, and he manipulates them. And I just think he absolutely knows that is ridiculous, but he knows that's what people want to believe, and he's just playing. He also sees it as political or legal cover. He sees it as legal cover, I think, as part of his, I believe it's part of his legal strategy to try to claim that he was just trying to uphold the true president of the United States. I don't think that's going to fly in it with the Washington D.C. jury.
Mm.
I think they know
Uh,
better than that, but yeah, and the whole thing's just a con, really.
uh, in court papers, prosecutors say that your former husband actually sent encrypted text messages to other Oath Keeper members, envisioning a worst case scenario where Trump would call the Oath Keepers, a part of them, to assist in DC. What do you think made him believe that? What made you think made him write that?
Well, it's definitely what he would want to believe. Um, I'm curious if there's a connection. I'm curious. He's also, it seems odd to say that he's risk adverse, but he actually is. And it's weird to say that, seeing everything he's done, but you see that he stayed outside of the Capitol. You see that he takes calculated risks. And I think that it's out of character for him to have pushed this hard if he wasn't told ahead of time that they weren't all going to go to prison. I feel like there was some message there. I feel like there was some connection there, not directly to Trump, but maybe maybe through multiple people and channels. For some reason, he got the message that they needed to push and create a tipping point. And that if they did that, and he's also living under the fear still. He was at the time still living under the fear of being indicted for his involvement in Bundy Ranch. He had been living under that for a really long time, the fear of being indicted for Bundy Ranch. And so I think he thought maybe this was his throwing his hat over the fence and then getting away with not being indicted. I think because he's just so fearful. I think I don't. There's a lot of it's speculation, but I know him better than anyone else on the earth, so I feel like I know his patterns. It's conjecture, but
Right.
I think he had contact with someone in the administration, and I think he got the go, and then it didn't work.
Wow. So you two separated in 2018.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to when you learned what went on, when you found out with the rest of the country about January 6th and knew that he was involved?
I didn't know. I mean, I knew he was involved. I thought it might be more of a Berkeley type thing or street fights, and thought he might be standing off to the outside somewhere, trying to stay out of it, trying to look like he was part of it, but not really. It was a few days later I saw the photos of the stack. And once I saw that, then I realized this was completely not what I thought. He was heavily involved in this. Nobody else organized that military stack, except for Stewart. The Proud Boys did not do that. No rioters did that. No militia did that. That was Stewart. I knew it before I saw the insignias. I knew that was him entirely.
If I can interrupt here, just for listeners, the stack
Oh,
being a military formation, this famous photo of the Oath Keepers where they're standing, tied to arms on one another along the Capitol, the famous photo of the Oath Keepers. What about that formation, that stack formation, made you think this has Stewart's fingerprints all over it?
They look like they could have been active duty military. Most people probably thought they were. They look like they were, and they probably, they train the same way. They're trained by military guys. They use only military language, over breakfast. And you know, yeah, it just the professionalism of it. I think most writers were not there for something like that. Um, the radios, in particular, um, just the professionalism of it, and the fact that they were on their way somewhere. You know, rioters are kind of wandering, and then they're going, "Oh, let's go into the Capitol," you know, but they were on their way somewhere in particular, and they're weaving through the crowd to get to a location, and nobody else seemed to be nobody else looked like that. This the idea that they were looked like they were on their way to do something. Just that mission look about them. I knew that that was Stewart for sure. That nobody else would have organized something like that. So then, and also that I put that together with his rhetoric was so odd and a little out of character. A few months out, and you know, some of the extremist experts noticed that too. This is not how Stewart usually talks. He's usually pretty measured. He'll throw in things that sound crazy and illegal, but when you look at it, it's very measured, very, you know, right on that legal edge. And then all of a sudden he's yelling about civil war out of nowhere. And it was really weird. It was really weird, and it just seemed out of character for him. And so I wasn't sure what to expect. And I thought maybe he was just having like another mental breakdown, maybe. And then, but when I saw that, I thought, okay, now I get it. Now I get it. His rhetoric changed. He got some kind of signal from somewhere, which is, I think, what a lot of extremist experts were wondering. Like, why is this is odd? This is odd. This rhetoric change is strange. And so I just kind of I second guessed myself a lot, you know, because I know, you know, he's personally harmed me and my family. So I have a tendency to look at him like, you know, no matter what he's doing, he has evil intent. So I kind of have to look at other people's, you know, um, a lot of folks who used to be with SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, were watching him really close, and I followed them on Twitter, and I just kind of spied on them and watched what they were saying to make sure I wasn't crazy.
When
You know, when I was so worried about what he was up to.
when did you first detect that? You mentioned this change in him, the change in his rhetoric. When did that start happening?
I would say it's maybe 3 or 4 months before J6. I always watched him on Twitter, just when he was still on there, just because I needed to know where he was. I worried about him, you know, getting anywhere near Montana. He was living in Texas. We were in Montana. And I was constantly worried about him coming this way, because a lot of times he'd head this way, and you know, once a year or whatever, he would declare he wanted to spend time with the kids, and I can't legally say no. So this is a whole thing, you know, where I have to have adult kids standing over the little kids and meet in a public place, and you know, and make sure everybody's safe. And so I was always watching for that. So I'd watched him a lot on Twitter, and so yeah, a couple months out, he just started talking crazy. And I mean, he's always talking crazy, but it's different, and it's really hard to place the nuance in what's different about it. But he's so measured in a legal sense. There was even a time, I think it was in 2015, where he gave a speech. He actually got put on the no-fly list right after it, where he said that John McCain should be hung. And people were saying, "Oh, put the Secret Service on him," and this is you know, a death threat. But then when people, you know, when you actually look at his statements, every single thing he said was right on a legal line. He stayed very careful on the legal lines of what he could and couldn't say. He said if John McCain should be put on trial for treason, and the crowd cheers. And if he's found guilty, he should be hung by the neck until dead. And the crowd cheers. Everybody remembers hung by the neck until dead, but he made sure he said everything, you know, in a scenario where it was illegal. It was a legal remedy. And so he's just careful in that way, usually.
And for folks who don't know the background, he's a Yale trained lawyer, correct? So I imagine he's kind of scrutinized that line pretty carefully. Have you read the court documents in the Oath Keepers case? And what did anything jump out at you and really surprise you when you found out what prosecutors say he did?
Um, well, the QRF certainly didn't surprise me. The boat to bring in the to bring across the weapons, that did not surprise me. That sounded very Stewart-like. Um, yeah,
That's
nothing really surprised me. Not really.
if you can unpack that, the QRF, the so-called Quick Reaction Force. I think for so many folks in the public, the whole concept of a group of militia members staying in a comfort inn across the Potomac River, planning to ferry weapons across the Potomac River at the command of former President Trump if he called them. That's what the allegation is.
Yeah,
I mean, it's so surprising to the
yeah.
public. Why was it just Stewart, as you say?
It just sounds like one of his plans. It just sounds like the type he would speak often in these ridiculous, almost fantasies, scenarios, and he would just repeat them and repeat them. And it just sounded like one of them. He had a whole fantasy scenario if the feds were to come to the property. There would be all these things that he never actually did. There'd be lights that came on, and AC/DC Hell's Bells would start playing from giant speakers, and the feds would know they were surrounded. And it's like his weird stuff. When that QRF sounded like, it's not funny, but I knew that it was the absurdity of I knew it was one of his plans. For sure, I knew that was, at least he had a lot of heavy input, especially the boat across the thing. It just sounds like him. It's the kind of stuff he would come up with, and most of the time when I would hear talk like that, I would just think it was silly. It's a lot of people wanting to be soldiers or wishing they were soldiers again, talking nonsense talk, and most of them never get off the couch. So, but it sounded like one of his little sort of make-believe scenarios.
Mm. He and a number of other accused co-conspirators, the prosecutors say, committed a seditious conspiracy against the United States of America, and other very, very serious charges that can put him away for a very long time. What are you hoping will happen at the upcoming trial?
You cut out. I heard put him away for a very long time, and then
Oh,
upcoming.
sorry. Well,
I think I got it.
I'll just repeat the
Okay.
whole thing just in case. That he's accused of a seditious conspiracy against the United States and other charges that can put him away for a very long time. What are you hoping will happen at the Oath Keepers trial?
Well, I'm a little nervous because it's a big charge, and I think he thinks he can beat it. I think he will go to trial. I do not think he'll plead out. He was very obsessed during Bundy Ranch with the idea that some of those guys chose to go to trial and they were acquitted, and he would always talk about how stupid it was for the guys that pled out, that they could have walked free and didn't. So maybe being in jail in the in-between time might changes his idea on that, but I think that he believes he can beat this, partially because he believes in himself in a really strange way. He believes that he is sort of a chosen person, and I think he believes he almost has magical powers, so that he's chosen to rise up and be this, what my kids mockingly call the king of the apocalypse. My adult kids. So he believes that, and he really does think that he's a great historical figure. So I think that he will go to trial. It makes me a little nervous I hope that they can connect the dots to make a good case. I always thought that, I mean, conspiracy of any type is his greatest fear. He's always been terrified of it because he walks those fine legal edges all the time in everything he does. Generally, the only way to get him on anything would be the whole package. You can't pick out a single thing he's done and say that's illegal. Every single thing, for the most part, is probably right on the line of legal. But when you look at the whole package, now you were creating something that was not legal. And so conspiracy has always been his real Achilles heel, and something he's always been afraid of because he knows that. I mean, he would do sessions before events, before things like Berkeley, before any group talks. He would bring everybody in like a football coach and explain, RICO and conspiracy and why we don't want to get caught up with conspiracy. And it's not for them, it's for him.
Mm.
And so that's always been his fear. It's the only thing they were ever going to get him on. I hope that there are other charges for backup. I think the Treasury Department is probably building a case. I think possibly Texas seems to be looking at some charges on their own. At least I just want to buy enough time to get all my kids to adulthood legally so that they're not forced legally to visit with him. I mean, that's my first thought is that. My second thought is for the rest of America, but my first thought is for my kids. And that's one of my greatest fears is that, I'm for whatever reason, the judge thinks he's a great guy in my state and I can't even get a restraining order and he has 50% custody. I maybe that will change because of pressure from these charges now, but if he's acquitted, I mean, he could technically grab all my kids and take them for 2 weeks, even though he's never really been alone with them before. So it's a little stressful,
right.
for sure.
I'm sure. You mentioned that your divorce hasn't been finalized yet, and you're actually seeking the public's help in supporting that your legal situation and other efforts. Can you talk about that?
I started to GoFundMe just because I'm so terribly in legal debt. I owe 15,000 plus I've got legal counsel now, and I'm trying to pay down one. I'm trying to split the difference, pay down one, and bring in another attorney. And it's a little rough. I really ran up the legal bills and didn't get very far. He's a Yale Law graduate, so my case is sealed, but he sort of ran up legal bills, just basically proposing ridiculous things, just things that don't even make any sense. Just, I mean, I can't talk in total specifics, but I would just say, like, here's an example is something he came up with is he would buy a house and I would be forced to be a tenant in that house until the last child was 18. And he would be my landlord and would control the comings and goings of the house. And that would be his version of child support. So there's stuff like that. No other attorney would ever sign off on. This is absurdities like that, just wasting time, just wasting court time and running up, my lawyer trying to get stuff done and answer back things. It's just nonsensical. And trying to get a reasonable, safe plan for the kids. Obviously, I tried, for supervised visitation, and that's when we were saying, it all went to hell. But because he's very crafty, he's the upstanding Yale law grad, and I have a high school diploma, and that was brought up, and things like that. It was rough, and then it just got snagged in the middle.
What would be your greatest fear if he were somehow to beat these very serious charges that have been leveled against him?
Well, on a personal level, it would be that he would try to see the kids without supervision for anything other than, an afternoon with people watching and in public, and he would try to take the kids for an overnight. And then I think he might try to disappear with them. That's on a personal level. That's my fear. Large scale, bigger picture fear is that he will try to rebrand, and that he might very well become sort of the unseen arm of a possible Trump administration if that were to happen. Sort of a Trump Brownshirt. So there's that whole possibility. I know he already did try to rebrand a little bit. He started an org was Kelly Sorrell, some really stupid name, Green Dragon Institute. But he is attempting to rebrand and maybe be in the background and maybe just do it all over again. It sounds completely preposterous, but I don't think it's impossible. I think it's a slight possibility, and I think if he were acquitted, if Trump were reelected, it just happened all over again under a different name, maybe. That's the worst case, I think.
Thank you very much for all of your time and for coming out and being public and talking about this. I really appreciate it,
Oh,
Tasha.
thanks. Thank you.